Hello, this is Jennifer McGuire, and I'm excited to be a guest here at Simon Says Stamp. Today I wanted to show you how you can get the look of colorful heat embossing without having to own every color under the sun. This technique works with a lot of different types of stamps, but especially those with stamp layering, like the goldfish you see here. I'm also going to show you how to create that window panel on a card. I'll be using some products from Hero Arts today. This is the color layering goldfish set. Now you can color these fish any way you want. I decided to go with a yellow and an orange. I'm using some new Hero Arts bold hybrid inks today. This is the dandelion, and on top of it I will stamp the tangerine. My favorite color in this release of these hybrid inks is this yellow. It's a nice bold yellow that stamps nice and vivid, and it's really quite a unique color. So I stamped the more solid bottom layer first with the yellow. Now I'm going to stamp the second layer in this set for the fish with the orange color. This is really easy to line up because you can just look through the stamp and line up the eyeball. There's a hole in each of the images for the eye, so it's easy to look right through and see where you need to stamp it. I'm making 2 cards as we go because I think it's a great way to add more cards to your stash to send to friends. So you'll see me do 2 of each stamp. So now I'm going to do the other fish in the set, do the bottom layer again in the yellow with orange on top. Now this set is fun. You can do like red for the first layer and blue on top and get some really cool effects. Really, the sky's the limits with the different colors that you can use for these fish. And by the way, you can use any inks you may have. There is a third layer for these fish, and this I'm going to do with the new Hero Arts Bold Caramel color. And I'm just going to stamp, it's just the eyes and kind of the mouth on the fish. Now, these new inks, I know a lot of people are going to ask a lot of questions. It's a nice bold colored hybrid ink. They're available, I think, in like 15 new colors, and they're all very bold. But the yellow is definitely my favorite from the release. Okay, so now I have all these fish stamped. It's time to go ahead and die cut them. I really like the Hero Arts dies because if you look, the cutting edge is actually right up against the inside edge of the die. So when you put this die over your stamped image, you're going to know exactly where it cuts. It's going to cut right on that inside edge. So you can line it up right up against the edge of your stamping, and you'll get a perfect cut every time. I'm using a tiny little piece of tape to tape the dies in place as I run them through my die cut machine, and I'll go ahead and cut out all 4 fish. And check out how beautiful these images are. I love stamp layering sets because they help you create beautiful things with little effort. I also decided to use a black marker just to color in part of their eye to make it pop even more. I really wanted to make these fish so that they had some dimension, shine, and texture. So that I wanted to use embossing powder. However, I didn't have yellow and orange colored embossing powders that would work, so I'm using clear embossing powder. So I'm taking that first stamp image, the one that I did in yellow before, but this time I'm inking it up with Versamark ink and stamping it right on top. So now this will have this clear kind of sticky ink on it, and I can add clear embossing powder to it and heat set it, and it'll look like I used orange and yellow embossing powders, but really it's just the colored ink in the clear. So if you have a bunch of die inks and you want a heat embossed image from it, just stamp the image again on top of the colored stamping with Versamark ink and then add clear embossing powder. It's a great way to get the look of heat embossing but not need a bunch of colors of powder. You just need that clear. You could even use a clear sparkle if you want some sparkle to it. So for this one, he's pretty solid, covered in embossing powder. I wanted to make it even thicker with more dimension. So what I'm going to do is once this cools, I'm going to stamp that same image again right on top of that embossing and that embossed image and put another layer of embossing on it. So we're doing a double layer of heat embossing here, and that gives it more dimension, more shine, and more texture. So if you really want to pump it up, you can put several layers on here. Or you can get like an ultra thick embossing powder, but really you can get the same effect by doing several layers of clear embossing. So this has lots of shine and lots of dimension, and here you can see what it looks like compared to the one without any embossing done at all. Now for this second fish, I wanted to show you a different option. If you have a stamp layering set like this goldfish one, you can heat emboss one of the layers. So on the second fish, I'm going to just make the orange part heat emboss. So this is going to look like we did this layer with orange embossing powder. So I'm using the second layer of the stamp. This is the one that we stamped with orange before. Stamping it right on top with Versamark ink and adding the clear embossing powder to the this. So now only the orange areas, that layer of stamping, will have the heat embossing. And this will give us more texture and more dimension to the fish. So it's just another option. So any of these stamp layering sets you have, try heat embossing just the top layer. It'll really make that image pop even more. So here you can see the difference. The one on the top is covered with 2 layers of clear embossing powder. The one on the bottom just has a little bit of clear embossing powder where the orange was only, so it has a lot more texture to it. 2 fun options and a great way to get more out of your stamps. Now it's time to pull the rest of our card together, and I have this clear panel that you see, this window along my card. I wanted to show you how to do that. First, I'm going to do some stamping. This is a Hero Arts background stamp. This is a new one, and I thought the bubbles on it kind of look like the fish. So I'm going to ink this up with soft pool ink from Hero Arts and stamp it onto a piece of pool colored cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So that would cover the entire front of my note card. I'm going to do this for both pieces so that I'll have one for each of my cards. Now I need to cut that panel out for the window, so I'm going to take both of these and hold them together so we can cut them both at once. I'm first going to cut off 1/2 inch, and I'll save that for my card. Then I'm going to move it over and cut it again at 1 1/4 inch, and that piece we're not going to need. That's what we're going to replace with the acetate window. So we're going to use the pieces on the left and the pieces on the right, and those other ones that were in the middle, we can save those for other cards. I need to do the same thing to the front of my note card. So this is a white note card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch off and then 1 1/4 inch off from that. We only need the card itself and that thin little 1/2 inch strip. And we will again replace that middle piece with the window. So I'm going to do this to both of my cards. Before I assemble my card, I'm going to go ahead and white heat emboss the "Just Keep Swimming" sentiment on the front of both of these blue pieces. Now for the window panel, I need a piece of plastic or acetate. I decided to use a piece of Hero Arts note card. There are these clear note cards from Hero Arts. I'm just going to cut them to be about 3 inches wide, and it's 5 1/2 inches tall. And you'll see that I trim this a little more narrow in a moment. But I get 2 pieces from this, one for each of my cards. This is a nice thick acetate that's great for card projects. Now it's time to sandwich this acetate between our white note card pieces and our blue pieces that will be on top. So I'm using a super strong adhesive. This is Be Creative tape. Any kind of strong adhesive would work here. I like this because it's strong and easy to work with. So I'm quickly putting strips on the front of the white note card and along that little 1/2 inch strip of white note card. Now we're going to sandwich our acetate piece between this and the blue. So I'm going to put the acetate down first. Now I go to put my acetate down here and I realize it's too wide. So I'm going to just quickly grab this and my other piece of acetate, and at once I'm going to cut them down to be a little more narrow, just a little bigger than 2 inches wide. I'm using my Tim Holtz trimmer. This is a great trimmer. It's quick to grab and easy to use, and it's very small. Okay, so now I can put my acetate piece down on the front of the card. Then we can grab that other little 1/2 inch strip and put it on the bottom piece of that acetate, right behind it. So we're gluing our acetate on the front of our white pieces here. So I'm going to line this up with the inside edge and then close the acetate down on it. Before we add our blue pieces on top of this, I'm going to add 2 more pieces of Be Creative tape right on top of the acetate, just so we can be sure that the blue pieces stay put on the front of the card and that our acetate is snug inside. And we're going to end up with this wonderful acetate window panel right along the front of our card. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the release paper here, and then we can add those blue pieces on top. And since we cut the blue pieces to be the same as the white pieces, they cover up the white perfectly, and all you see is that clear window on the front of the card. This is one of those techniques that looks a little tricky at first, but once you've done it once, you get the hang of it, and it's something that you can use over and over again. And I really like having that little window panel. It's something different to offer with your card. You could even do some stamping on that window panel with some white StazOn ink. I also wanted to do some stamping that would show through the window from the inside of the card. So I grabbed the seaweed that's in the same stamp set, and I stamped it with 2 different colors of green inks a few times along the inside of the card just to show through that window panel. So I used lime green and Green Hills Hero Arts inks. To add my little goldfish to the front of the card, I'm putting some foam tape pieces behind the fish, only on their tails, only on the areas that will be on top of the blue cardstock. Anything that's hanging over the edge onto the window, I'm not putting any adhesive on the back in those areas because I don't want the adhesive to show through the window. So you'll see I'm just putting tiny pieces of the foam tape on the tails of the fish since their heads will be over the window. I also added little pearls for bubbles coming up from the fish. Now I wanted a sentiment on the inside of the card also, so I grabbed another new Hero Art stamp set called Many Everyday Messages, and I stamped with black ink the thinking of you message. I thought that went well with the encouragement message on the outside. This is a fun way to add something on the inside of the card to match with the outside. I hope you'll give these ideas a try of creating a window panel on the front of your card, and also for adding clear embossing to some solid colored stamped images to make it look like you used colored embossing powder. I appreciate you watching, and if you have questions, be sure to leave them below in the comments. Thanks for watching.